he passed through Casablanca, Morocco, in Africa, and Lisbon, Portugal. He finally arrived in the U.S. in early November 1941, 1 month before Pearl Harbor. Harry was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1942 and was shipped back to Europe as an American soldier. He came upon the infamous Buchenwald concentration camp on April 13, 1945. Harry is currently a retired businessman who has lived in the Valley for 31 years, has served on the boards of several Jewish organizations, and is a past president of the Phoenix Holocaust Survivors Association. Ella Adler, his wife, was born in Krakow, Poland. She is a survivor of several concentration camps, including Auschwitz. She was incarcerated for a total of 4 years. While all or most of her family were put to death by the Nazis, her survival is a miracle. Towards the end of the war, she was rescued from sure extermination by Oskar Schindler from the movie The Schindler's List, which is why we all requested that you see that movie so you'd have some idea about the background here, who connived the Nazis to send needed workers to various factories in Czechoslovakia. Ella came to the U.S. in 1947 as a refugee. She married Harry in 1952. The couple moved to Arizona in 1963, where she obtained her master's degree in social work at ASU. And I'll just put in a little plug here that prior to that, she graduated from Glendale Community College in their first graduating class ever. She is now retired, but still on call as a medical social worker at a local Valley hospital. Harry and Ella have 2 children, a daughter living in Israel for the past 13 years, who's a mother of 3 children, and a bachelor son, an MBA Harvard graduate living in Seattle. So at this point, I'm going to turn the session over to the 2 of you, and what I'll do is let you speak, and I'm going to ask people to hold any questions that you might have until after you've had an opportunity to talk.
Right. Now, we will talk about the obedience after you get to know me. I like to let you know what my experience is so you will have an idea where I'm coming from. Now, Holocaust. The Holocaust referred to a specific event in the 20th century. The systematic bureaucratic annihilation of 6 million Jews by Nazi regime with collaborators as a central act of state during the World War II. In 1933, approximately 9 million Jews lived in the 21 countries of Europe that would be occupied by Germany during the war. By the way, can you hear me in the back? Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. By 1945, 2 out of every 3 European Jews had been killed. Although Jews were the primary victims, up to 500,000 gypsies and at least 200,000 mentally or physically disabled persons were also victims of the genocide. As Nazi tyranny spread across Europe from 1933 to 1945, millions of other innocent people were persecuted and murdered. More than 3 million Soviet prisoners of war were killed because of their nationality. Poles as well as other Slavs were targeted for slave labor, and as a result, tens of thousands perished. Homosexual and other deemed antisocial were also persecuted and often murdered. However, while not all the victims were Jews, we need to remember that all the Jews were victims. The Holocaust was a rupture of philosophy, history, and culture, a rent in the fabric of society and civilization. It shattered our religious faith in God and our secular faith in human goodness and progress. To quote Michael Barnbaum, a historian, and I quote, "The central theme of the Holocaust is not reverse, goodness or resistance, liberation or justice, but death and destruction. dehumanization and devastation, and above all, loss. Behind each loss was a person whose life was ended tragically and prematurely. And for those who survived, there was the burden of memory, haunting memories, non-heroic memories of world shattered and destroyed, of defeat of life in its aftermath. My story mirrors Birnbaum's description. I was a 16-year-old girl, the shelter and pampered daughter of a well-to-do businessman living in Krakow, Poland. Is there anybody here Polish, from Polish descendant? No? There was a maid in the house to make my bed, hang my clothes, and help my mother in house chores. I had a 19-year-old sister, Ida, who attended university. My older stepsister, Lilka, was already married and had 2 small children. I had a large extended family, since my mother had 9 siblings and my father had 4. Out of 50 members of my extended family, only 5 survived, among them my sister Lilka. She survived, but her husband and both of the little children were killed. When the Nazi invaded Poland in 1939, I believe in September, all Jews were registered and their property confiscated. We were forced to wear a Star of David armband on our left arm whenever we were in public. In Krakow, we were herded into a walled compound called the ghetto, with 3 or 4 families crowded into tiny apartments. A long process of starvation began. Nobody, except with special permit, was allowed in or out of the ghetto. We survived on the smuggled food. I remember looking out of the window one morning to see women, men, and children lying on the street. They died during the night from starvation. Raids went on constantly. People were dragged away by the German soldier not to be seen again. We learned to live with fear. My mother suffered a nervous breakdown, but we could not put her into the ghetto hospital because they were raided every day and the weak had been taken away and killed. My father, who still had a little money, bribed a guard and was able to take her into the city hospital. This scheme worked for a while, but one day Mother was identified as being Jewish. She had been taken out of the institution and shot. We received a letter indicating that she was moved to another facility and any question would not be answered. It was only after the war, when I went back to Krakow, and I went to that hospital that I found out what really actually happened. My beautiful 90-year-old sister Ida, who was dating a Christian boy, converted to Christianity in the hope of saving her life. But she was denounced by the parents of her boyfriend and imprisoned. I have no idea when she died and how she died. I know she never came back. When the Krakow ghetto was liquidated in 1943, like they call in German, anybody speak German? Judenrein, being free of Jews. My father and I were marched to Plazow, a concentration camp about 20 miles away from Krakow. The nightmare ahead had just begun. The way to survive in such a situation is to believe that by some miracle you're going to survive, even so people around you were being killed. The time in Plazow was marked by public execution, which occurred daily in the rounding out of prisoners for Auschwitz, which was another 25 miles away. Auschwitz was the central destination for a large number of prisoners who were brought in for extermination in the gas chambers. Those of you who had seen the movie Schindler's List will have a better understanding of what actually happened. The movie depicts my concentration camp experience in the Krakow ghetto, in Plazow, and in Auschwitz quite accurately. Vivian's memory of Plazow experience are vividly imprinted in my mind, even now, 50 years later. I remember standing in a public square where all the remnants of the children were taken away from their crying mothers, while lullabies were piped through the public address system. My best friend was hung for a minor infraction, and we were forced to watch. Anyone who looked away was shot. The rope broke, but she was hung again. One day, I was chosen at random by the commander, Amen Yet, to be shot. They stood me against the wall with several other prisoners, and machine guns were pointed at us. It was a beautiful spring day. I recall I was above a piece of dust, but not to be myself. I thought about how upset my father would be when he came to my section and find me gone. I wanted so much to live. I will never feel the same about life again. At the last moment, Gerd decided upon experiment in pain. I was placed on a table and beaten into unconsciousness by a Ukrainian soldier, but I survived. One of the most gruesome memory of Plazow, and this was one of the experiences that they didn't show in the Schindler's List in the movie, before its evacuation, was the time in the summer of 1944 when I, among other prisoners, were forced to open the shallow graves of hundreds of victims who had been killed before, and we had to throw torches into the trenches so that the bodies, soaked in kerosene, would burn to ashes. The Russians were advancing, and the Nazis did not want to leave evidence of their atrocities. The stench of the burning bodies permeated the air for weeks. One evening, when I went to look for my father in his section, I'm still talking about my Plazow experience, I found the barracks empty. I was told that the whole barrack had been shipped to a known destination. I never saw my father again. After 2 years in Plazow, I was shipped to Auschwitz. At the time of arrival there, I was stripped naked, my hair was shaved, and along with other prisoners, I was sent through a selection process where Dr. Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, looked us over and made the decision who would live and who would die. Being pointed to the right meant life, and I was pushed to the left when I fell into the bare floor. I was emancipated after 3 years of incarceration and looked like a skeleton. Above my head, there was an open window, and I noticed a woman prisoner shouting to her daughter, who was sitting next to me, to jump out or she would be killed. At that particular moment, Dr. Mengele stepped out of the room, and the girl jumped out of the window. I jumped after her. I think this was the only time in the 4 years of incarceration that I did something to save my life. We blended into the crowd of the healthier women, which was being led away to be transported to a labor camp in Czechoslovakia, where I was liberated by the Russians at war end, May 1945. I weighed 55 pounds. I was 20 years old. There are painful memories connected with the camp in Czechoslovakia called Freudenthal, which meant Valley of Joy in Germany. What an irony. One of these memories is the constant hunger. I will never forget the excruciating pain that gnawed at my inside day in and day out. The only thing I thought about was food. Our daily ration consists of about 400 calories. I mean, we didn't know what calories were in those days, but I'm just giving you want to give you an idea. 2 slices of bread, a bowl of soup, and a cup of coffee. A good sight to behold was a dead horse lying in the middle of the camp. That meant that we would have a small piece of meat in the soup. This happened only twice during the 7 months I spent in the labor camp. I even stooped so low as to steal bread during the night from my fellow inmates while they were asleep. I remember standing in a line to get my bowl of soup, and I was praying that the ladle would be inserted deep to the bottom of the pot where the soup was thicker. I still have a tendency to do that, even though I'm not hungry. To this day, I have respect for food and reverence for bread, which I never throw away. Another terrible memory was lying ill in an unheated barrack in the severe winter of 1944, about 4 months before the liberation, next to a crying infant who was left to die so that his mother could live. They couldn't both survive. I consider my survival a miracle. I have no answer as to why I survived. I only know there were special circumstances that kept me alive. First, during the 2 of the rounds up in Krakow ghetto, I was pulled out of a train destined to Auschwitz. As you remember, the one of you who had seen the Schindler List, so that's the way the Jewish people were transported. We were placed in a cattle wagon to get to Auschwitz. Second, in Plazow, I was chosen to be shot, but instead I was beaten and survived another day. Third miracle, after the selection by Dr. Mengele in Auschwitz, I jumped out of the window. I was sent to Czechoslovakia with a transport of 350 women as a result of Oskar Schindler's intervention. He had bribed the commander in Auschwitz to get additional 3,000 women out of the camp to work in a small textile factory in Czechoslovakia where there was a labor shortage. Being in such a camp was not a paradise, but it was managed by older SS men who were less fanatical people. My fourth miracle was my escape from a death march at Freudenthal villages, fearing reprisal from the advancing Russian, persuaded the guards not to proceed with the march. Other factors contribute to my survival. I was fortunate to have the ability to retreat from the terrible surrounding into my inner self and dream about sitting with my family about the candle-lighted Shabbat holiday table. In my memory, I warm my starving, shivering bones by the warmth of those candles, and my starved body by the imaginary food. Equally significant was ever presence of hope, which plays such an important part in my survival. I never gave up hope of seeing my father again so that we could rebuild our lives. While being marched through the village of Freudenthal in April 1945, 3 months before the liberation, I noticed candles burning in the window in front of picture of Hitler. That was the time that he committed suicide. I didn't know about it. I just seeing his picture with a candle, I was able to speculate what had happened. And the hope again entered my empty soul. I knew then that the nightmare was coming to an end. So miracle, the warm memories of my family, and above all, hope was my salvation. As you heard from the introduction, you know, I did arrive in the United States in 1957. Now, I think I'd like to stop at that point because we don't have as much time. I'm sorry we were a little bit late. And I would like Harry to tell a bit of his experience, and then perhaps we can ask you please to ask us a question, so maybe we can make it a little bit easier for you to understand the nightmare road. Sometimes I have a hard time picking. I would. Harry?
Well, my experience was quite different than Ella's. Of course, I managed to survive. I managed to come to the United States with my family intact. Some of the extended families did not make it. Those that remained in Europe were killed. I came to the States. I was at that time 18 years old. I went back to college, to school, to high school, I should say, graduated high school. And as I graduated, and as I became 19 years old, I was drafted in the Army. I had a decent command of English. I spoke it relatively well. I'd been in England for a few months in 1937 when my parents decided I should get a little schooling in England, and I spoke relatively well. You didn't have to be a citizen of the United States to be drafted in the Army during the war. The mere fact that you were walking and breathing, that was good enough reason to draft you in the Army. And I took my basic training. Would you believe I was in Yuma, Arizona in 1943 in the Desert Training Center that Patton put together here. And there I became a medical orderly and was attached to a MASH unit. You've seen the movie MASH. I was a little bit like Klinger. Didn't wear any dresses. And then the Army, in their wisdom, discovered that I spoke several languages and I was wasting my time rolling bandages. So they shipped me clear across country and put me into the 5th Corps headquarters, which was really an intelligence unit. And I was shipped back to Europe in 1943, in the winter of 1943. And in England, we sort of mapped out the plans for the invasion, which took place in 1944. And I landed in the Normandy beachhead on D+2, which is the day of the invasion, 2 days later. And we fought the war all the way from the Normandy beaches right into Czechoslovakia. When I was in a town called Weimar in Germany, we received advice from our intelligence advanced echelon that there had been some atrocities committed in some stockade, which was about 10 miles down the road. We really didn't know what it was all about, but the colonel and I says, let's get into the Jeep and let's take a look at this. And we drove, we followed the direction, came in front of this, all you could call it was a stockade, really. It was a compound strung with barbed wires all the way around. Every 50 or so yards there was a tower going up. You know, and as I stared, and the door was wide open, you know, and there were American troops and all kinds of people milling around. And yes, there were some people, you know, hanging on the barbed wires and looking at us, and they were emaciated. Some were had prison clothes, you know, the striped clothes that you saw in the movies, and some were just in tattered clothes and then, you know, rags. It took us a little while to understand what went on there. We had no idea until we ran into a captain of a medical unit that was attached to our organization. We asked him what that was all about. He told us that most of the prisoners here were Jews that had been marched, death marches, you know, these forced marches from concentration camps in the east, and they had been marched west. The Germans took all their prisoners. As the Russians advanced and all the camps were liquidated, they moved them right into Germany. And what I saw in Buchenwald evidently were the remains of some of these people that had been marched on these death marches. Of course, then he took us to some parts of the camp in Buchenwald, and that was Buchenwald, the camp that I saw. We had a lot of piles of dead bodies, piled one on top of the other. Oh, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 feet high. There must have been hundreds and hundreds of bodies, just piled one on top of the other, with people, no eyes or dark eyes staring at you. It was a horrible thing to see. You know, in spite of the fact that I was a soldier and had seen a lot of terrible things in war, nothing really prepares you for this when you see a sight like that. And as we were talking to that captain, there were GIs bringing in German civilians from the surrounding areas at gunpoint. And the civilians were told to take the bodies off the pile and throw them into a ditch. You've seen those movies. We had to dig deep trenches, you know, to bury all these people. That was their graveyard. Thousands of people were just thrown into these ditches and covered up with lime, and then they covered it up with earth. You know, as a 20-year-old soldier, you somehow don't react to these things the way you do in later life. I'm now 72 years old and I remember these things. And I'm perhaps more sensitive today to what I saw than when I was 20 years old. I was a soldier, I was a kid, I was in the army, there was a war on. I really didn't see the total monstrosity that we were to discover as the front moved eastward. And when we discovered the remnants of the people of the other camps, and the Russians who were advancing really saw the worst of the camps. The Russians liberated Auschwitz. And the British liberated Bergen-Belsen. But these were not the only camps. There were hundreds of these camps all over the place. So I'm a witness to her agony, if you will. And this is something that you never forget. I came home and started what I call a normal life. Met Ella after the war, married. We've been quite happy in our life together. It's been 44 years. And that's really all I have to say.
Just wanted to define happy. As I mentioned before, we were our relationship wonderful. I was blessed. And I say blessed because to me, every day is special. I feel I'm so grateful to be alive. But we're talking about the happiness. I do not think, as much as I would like, that I can ever be called happy. You know, the memory of my experience will never go away. And the only way that I could work with it without being depressed, whatever. Number one, I was fortunate to have a family. I was bring another life to continue. I went to school, and then I chose social work, because in social work I was able to identify with the underdog. What I mean by underdog, people who are hurting, whether they ethnic group people or welfare people, in the hospital, sick people. I learned that by giving, by sharing, by using my experience to make somebody feel a little better, I can cope and I can keep my head high, and I do not need. And I don't have a corner in suffering. I felt, and this is why one of my function, you know, for the last 20 years, in addition to working, you know, was to go and talk to school, talk to students, and try to somehow for them to see what are the moral imperatives, what can they learn from the Holocaust experience. And there's a lot of things that we could learn. Now this probably will lead me, I want to focus on the subjects that you are studying now. I spoke to Ms. Meyer. Am I pronouncing?
Major.
Major, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Major.
Meyer's German pronunciation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's right. Whether she ever talked to you about Milgram experiment? Does any one of you know what the Milgram experiment is? Probably not. Okay, let me share this with you. I mean, this has really nothing to do with my personal experience, but it relates to what it is, okay? Now, this was done by Stanley Milgram, who was responsible. The Holocaust forces us to ask how people could obey orders that ended in the murder of millions of people. The issue of mass obedience had produced heated debate. Stanley Milgram's controversial laboratory research, described below, was designated to compare German and American level of obedience. He wanted to know how would the American people react, you know. You know that Germans follow order, you know, blindly, you know, heard about the Nuremberg trial. Would you like it? Okay, I think he liked it.
It'll be easier, you may follow it a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't, he doesn't have that. Yeah, which sometimes throws you off.
He's talking about Hannah Arendt's phrase, the banality of evil, to describe the results of the experiment. In the experiment, ordinary persons imparted electric shocks to the victims, not for any aggressive tendencies, but out of a sense of obligation. Thus, ordinary people, by simply doing their jobs, chose to participate in a destructive process. The Nazis, the murderers of European Jews, is the most extreme instance of an immoral act carried out by thousands of people in the name of obedience. Yet in lesser degree, this type of thing is constantly reoccurring. Ordinary citizens are ordered to destroy other people, and they do so because they consider it their duty to obey orders. In order to take a close look at the act of obeying, I, Stanley is talking, set up a simple experiment at Yale University. Eventually, the experiment was to involve more than 1,000 participants and would be repeated at several universities. Two people came to a psychology laboratory to take part in a study of memory and learning. One of them is designated as a teacher, and the other is designated as a learner. The experimenter explained that the study is concerned with the effect of punishment on learning. The learner is conducted into a room, seated in a chair. His arms are strapped to prevent excessive movement, and an electrode attached to his wrist. He is told that he is to learn a list of words, of word pairs. Whenever he makes an error, he will receive an electric shock of increasing intensity. The real focus of the experiment is the teacher. After watching the learner being strapped into place, he is taken into the main experimental room and seated before an impressive shock generator. Its main feature is a horizontal line of 30 switches ranging from 15 volts to 140 volts in 15-volt increments. There are also verbal designations which range from slight shock to danger to severe shock. The teacher is told that he is to administer the learning test to the man in the other room. When the learner responds correctly, the teacher moves on to the next item. When the other man is given an incorrect answer, the teacher is to give him an electrical shock. He is to start at the lowest shock level, that's 15 volts, and to increase the level each time the man makes an error, going through 30 volts, 45 volts, and so on. The teacher is a genuinely naive subject who has come to the laboratory to participate in an experiment. The learner, or victim, is an actor who actually receives no shock at all. The point of the experiment is to see how far a person will proceed in a situation in which he is ordered to inflict pain on a protesting victim. At what point will the subject refuse to obey the experimenter? Conflict arises when the man receiving the shocks begins to indicate that he's experiencing discomfort. At 75 volts, the learner grunts. At 120 volts, he complains verbally. At 150, he demands to be released from the experiments. His protests continue as the shocks escalate, growing increasingly vehement and emotional. At 285 volts, his response can only be described as an agonized scream. For the subject, the situation is not a game. Conflict is intense and obvious. On one hand, the suffering of the learner presses him to quit. On the other, the experimenter, a legitimate authority to whom the subject feels some commitment, enjoins him to continue. Each time the subject hesitates to administer the shock, the experimenter orders him to continue. There are, of course, enormous differences between carrying out the order of a commanding officer during times of war and carrying out the order of an experimenter. Yet, one may ask in a general way, how does a man behave when he is told by a legitimate authority to act against a third individual? A reader's initial reaction to the experiment may wonder why anyone in his right mind would administer even the first shocks. Would he not simply refuse and walk out of the laboratory? But the fact is that no one ever does. Since the subject has come to the laboratory to aid the experimenter, he's quite willing to start off with the procedure. Despite the fact that many subjects experience stress, despite the fact that many protest to the experimenter, a substantial proportion continue to the last shock on the generator. Many subjects will obey the experimenter no matter how vehement the pleading of the person being shocked, no matter how painful the shock seems to be, and no matter how much the victim pleads to be let out. A commonly offered explanation is that those who shocked the victim at the most severe level were monsters, the sadistic fringe of society. But if one considers that almost 2/3 of the experiment, of the participants, fall into the category of obedient subject, and that they represented ordinary people, the argument becomes very shaky. Indeed, it is highly reminiscent of the issue that arose in connection with Hannah Arendt's 1963 book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. Arendt contended that the prosecution's effort to depict Eichmann as a sadistic monster was fundamentally wrong, that he came closer to being an uninspired bureaucrat who simply sat at his desk and did his job. It was felt that the monstrous deed carried out by Eichmann required a brutal, twisted, and sadistic personality. After witnessing hundreds of ordinary people submit to the authority in our own experiment, and that's Stanley Meldring talking, I must conclude that Arendt's conception of the banality of evil comes closer to the truth than one might dare imagine. The ordinary person who shocked the victim did so out of a sense of obligation and not for any particular aggressive tendencies. What do you think of that?
But I would like to ask whether you could, some of you, the brave one, could give me an example. In our country, in the United States, do you remember an incident or situation where people followed blindly and they were killing innocent people or hurting them just because they were ordered to do so?
Or whether they thought it was the right thing to do so.
Anybody?
My Lai massacre?
Yes.
My Lai?
Right.
My Lai.
Does everybody know what
Vietnam.
is My Lai? Could you perhaps let them class
Tell them what it
know?
was.
Because that's very important.
Well, I was in Vietnam, and the American soldiers were taken to a small village where there were approximately, I think, 300 villagers, and maybe a few more. And the captain, who was Cali, had his men round up all the villagers, take them away from the village just a bit, and systematically kill them all under his orders to kill them. At first, some of the soldiers didn't believe the orders. They thought that they hadn't heard him correctly. He went back to the ones who were not killing the villagers and ordered them again to kill them. And they did. They killed, I think, 300, 320. And these were women. These were mostly women and children. They were not soldiers. They were mostly women and children.
Okay, could you give me an example where people, Americans, refuse orders in our country? Around same period, was it?
Well, there were some.
No, I'm talking about the war. I'm talking about the conscientious objectors. And the reaction to it was very negative, right? They were called a coward. They were really, they felt like they were traitors. And yet, they refused to fight a war, which they felt was not just.
Or went to Canada.
They went to Canada, right. Right. Of course, not everybody could go to Canada, so there were not that many. Now, how is there anybody who could, do you have any opinion? Okay, what would you do? And what does it take to say no or to say yes when somebody orders you to do?
I think it takes strength of conviction. You know, people talk now about children not having a good home base or being, you know, not raised in a stable society, household, and they may not have the strength of conviction when faced with a decision like that to make the right decision.
But the strength of conviction sometimes comes out of an education in a home where there is bias. You know, the bias that we hear, that we learn in our own homes, gets carried on as we grow older. So we have certain biases. And we have to resist that bias. We have to learn how to overcome sometimes the negative things that we have learned as a result of our upbringing.
Right.
I'd like to give you an example what happened during the war. There were people, there were by far few, but yet they were many. There were about, I would say, 10,000 people who resist Hitler, maybe more. What it meant to resist, I don't mean Hitler and his order, meant definite death. I remember when I was in Plazow, I had seen 3 times a German soldier in uniform who had been brought in and they were shot because apparently there were civilians, there were about 6,000, which is a very small number, but yet there were 6,000 civilians in Europe who were willing to die rather than to live in that horrible situation.
We're talking about documented cases now.
Yeah, this is something that is documented. Now, there were very few people who were willing to help or hide the Jews, because I can understand they were told, and the Germans followed, so if they do help to hide a child or a family, they will be killed. And how many people are brave enough to sacrifice their own life? Yet, there were some, and even so there were so few. It's an example that there are some people among us, and some of us right here will be the one who would stand up and say no to an order, which is being immoral, does not go together. Now, one example of resistance, which we Jewish people survived, I have a great respect for, was Denmark. When Hitler and his cohorts invaded Denmark, they gave orders to the king, they have a kingdom, to order all the Jews to wear a Star of David, you know, on their arm, in order to be distinguished from the non-Jews, because there was no way that you could tell, except for a few examples. The king had given orders to all his subjects to put a Star of David and to wear it in order that the Jews could not be discovered. However, he knew eventually Germans will caught up with them. So during the night, they make sure to send police, Danish police, to all the Jewish people that they knew where they lived, and put them on a boat and ship them across to Sweden, which was neutral. And except for 500 people who the police was not able to reach, there were about, I think,
8,000 Jews were
So it
saved.
just shows us that there is a way that we could not obey and do whatever we call the positive
But I
things.
want to, can I bring that 50 years later in today's time? Let's talk about today, this business of following blindly or being obedient to a concept, to an idea, to the point where you could do harm to somebody else. The media today is totally different than the media than 50 years ago. And I sense that when I look at that TV, that I hear a message, you know, this is the right thing to do and this is the wrong thing to do, and this happened because of such and such and such. I don't get a neutral message. I get a message that is slanted towards a particular point of view. And I act according to the right thing, you know, while I should really, hey, wait a minute. Is it true what I'm hearing? Do I have to do this? Is this the right thing to do? Or do I want to change? Or do I want to not to do the thing that I am sort of told to do or the way I should act?
The idea is, and when I speak to kids, most of the youngsters that I address are the junior and high school. And I try to impress on them that we always have a choice. And we have no right to blame somebody else because there is a consequences. Whatever you choose something, there be consequences, whatever. And to be brave enough to stand up and to be counted, not to be follower. I mean, this is very deadly, to follow your peers blindly. But before you follow, just try to think and try to reach inside yourself and ask yourself, is that what I want to do? And to know that they have a choice. Also the idea that you are your brother's keeper. So unless we are defending the rights of others, minority, people, group, the same thing will happen to us. I like to paraphrase a quote that was found after the war. It was written by a bishop, Episcopalian bishop, who at the beginning, German, followed Hitler till he realized what was going on. And he was in prison because he refused to follow his order. Anyway, he had written that essay, and he said, when they came to take away the Jews, I didn't do anything because I was not a Jew. When they came to take away the labor people, I didn't do anything because I wasn't a laborer. When they came to take away the Catholic, I didn't do anything. I was not Catholic. When they came to take me away, there was no one left to help me. Does that make sense to you? So we're talking about now, Harry just brought the subject. Just about a week ago, we, the Jewish people, survivor, had commemorated. This is once a year we have a memorial to the memory of the 6 million who died. And we had asked, it's always open to the community. And the theme of that memorial was trial in Nuremberg. And we had asked 2 judges to come in and talk about what the Nuremberg trial fair. Okay. One was talking about the Nuremberg trial, what actually happened, which we don't have time to do it. The other judge was talking about what is happening now in our country and what is our moral responsibility to do something about it. And I just like to read it to you, it's short. In this country, the issue, by the way, this judge, his name is Barry Schneider, sits on the Superior Court of Arizona, Maricopa County, okay? And that's what we say. In this country, the issue of racism is pervasive. We see it in the Rodney King affair, the case of Bernard Goetz, the race card in the O.J. Simpson trial, the serious candidacy of former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan for the United States Senate. A recent example of what some say comes close to the state-sponsored racism is the overwhelming passage in 1994 in California of Proposition 187, which mandated that illegal immigrants cannot receive public services. Education, health, and social services officer must ask for ID and report those they suspect of having entered the United States illegally. The promotion of and campaign for the initiative unleash a torrent of inappropriate, racially motivated conduct. The aftermath of Proposition 187, adopted by 60% of voters, saw reports of increased incident of discrimination against and harassment of the Latinos. Where is Proposition 187 now? It was stopped by a strong, independent federal judge. The Jews did not have such a judge or the support of the government institution in Nazi Germany. Jews understand all too well the evil of state-sponsored or state-encouraged attack on particular individual or groups. It is not necessary for those who are singled out to be Jews for us to recognize that a society that would allow the promotion of hatred against any minority holds threatening consequences for all Americans. I'm sure some of you probably do not agree, but then you had never been persecuted. You do not know what it means to be different and to be put down and to be deprived of civil rights. But I think when you study obedience, disobedience, those are things that you need to keep in mind. I wish that more of you would ask questions and give me some idea what goes on in your head.
Yeah, don't be chicken fight.
That's right.
It's a fight.
You have an opportunity. Don't forget, you are the last generation who are listening to survivors. The average age of a survivor is about 72, all right?
No,
in about
76.
76, excuse me. In about 5-7 years, none of the survivors, even if they are alive, many of them will die, they will not be able to speak up. So we sort of came from hell. We had seen the very devil. And the fact that I'm here, that I can speak to you and I can share a very personal experience, you know, it shows you that you can overcome no matter what hell, if you have the stamina and if you have, you know, the good colloquial word guts, you can move mountains. And so I'd like you to take advantage and ask me any question that puzzles you and might help you somehow in understanding, you know.
I have a question about, you both have children together. How did you raise them? Did you use your experiences as an example? I read that in, you know, in some cases, Holocaust survivors will not bring that up. It will just bring, you know, will teach their children, like you're saying, not to be passive and to stand up. Were you very honest with your children about your experience?
I think we were honest with the kids when they were old enough to understand what it was all about. And when the kids saw the tattoo on Ella's arm, of course, you know, questions are raised. We never hid the fact that we were Holocaust, that Ella was a Holocaust survivor. I think we raised them in a fairly normal atmosphere. Although, you know, statistics show that the children of Holocaust survivors, while they are high achievers and extremely high achievers, and you relate them to other kids, do carry problems, do carry burdens that perhaps the normal American would not carry. Yes, there is something to be said for that. I don't know what kind of trauma my kids experienced as a result of that. You know, there comes a time also in your life when you say, all right, I heard that already, you know.
And kids are good at doing that.
And
yeah, they don't want it. And you can't blame them. I mean, they want to live, they don't want it. You know, my son always Catholic. Mom, he said, you always told me that the only way that you mature is through pain. He said, there must be another way. I said, and Alan, I tell him, so I explained to him, Alan, what I meant by that was that unless something inside of you, there is some kind of a shake-up, a trauma, you never really get in touch with your feeling in yourself. And the real maturity, whether you like it or not, I'm not talking about happiness, come with experience. And let's face it, life is not a ball of cherries, you know. And you have to take it, you have to learn to you know, like they say, there is a time to laugh and there's a time to cry. And there's a time for all season, and you have to have a right perspective. But I think they, as far as I would say, what I try to teach, to share, not to teach, is my experience, is the hope. No matter what happened to you in the future, I mean, again, life is sometimes hard, it does challenges us. Never give up hope. If I gave up hope, and I had a moment that I could not go on, that it was not, I couldn't move, and I don't know where I found the strength, and I just wanted not to get up from that bank that I was sleeping, but I knew in the morning at 4 o'clock when the bugle blew, and I didn't get up and got dressed, and I stay in that bench, they will come and shut me, okay? And somehow I always, I mean, apparently I'm here, have the strength, you know, and pray, whatever, in order to give me strength and believe. I never lost the belief that somehow I'm going to survive. Now, if I did not have the belief, I would not be here. So I want to pass on to you, never give up hope, no matter how difficult things are, you know. Are there any other questions? Here.
Do you ever want to deny your faith? Do you ever feel like, why is this happening to us? You know, you try to... Like,
no, you see, during the war, I had no time to think. I mean, I couldn't sometimes think. I was 4 years of concentration, especially in the last 4 years. I was almost like vegetable. My mind was not really functioning. We're talking about selective attention. I could only think about food, work, and I was even eating grass if I could find a garbage, anything, in order to calm my pain. So I didn't fully, so it wasn't during the war that I was questioning. It was after the war. I was ill, I was depressed. After I got back to myself, that I began to question, you know, and I still didn't find the answer, except that when I look around, you know, me, especially working in a hospital, I see so much pain and I see so much struggle that I do not focus on me, I focus on others. By focusing on other people, helping them get better, you know, whatever, spiritually or talking about, counseling them, I feel that I'm feeling definitely better, and I feel worthwhile. I feel that I deserve to live, because many times I question, why was I chosen to live? Why didn't my mother, my father, my sister, why me? And I thought that I have the responsibility maybe to walk the extra mile because I'm here and passing on whatever I can to others. Yes, sir.
Yes, do you feel that the atrocities that have been happening today in Serbia, Croatia, are a descendant of what was coming down in the Second World War in Europe?
Yes.
An extension of these types of prejudices?
Well, no, what you have there in Yugoslavia is a little bit different. You have a civil war. You have two ethnic groups that are hitting on each other. Two religious entities who don't like each other. And that is, the Holocaust is different in the sense that there you have one government that sanctioned, approved, it was the law to kill these people. This is different. You have a civil war.
Doesn't diminish the pain and the trauma, but it is different.
The idea is
It is there, yes. It is.
There you have ethnic minorities and majorities and religious entities who for the last, thousands of years, since the beginning of civilizations, you know, religion has been, in my opinion, the thing that has created a great deal of of problems in this world. I mean, you're being told, this is the way you have to live, and this is the person that you have to believe in, and this fellow up there is watching you, and if you don't behave, you're going to have a problem. So I am, as you can tell, I'm somewhat of an agnostic in this thing. And I can, again, you have a problem in Yugoslavia. Definitely, you've got the Muslims beating up on the Christians and vice versa. I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but the fact that that strong belief that they have, you understand, is the problem. Go on and on. The Crusades were a disaster.
Do you think that Holocaust can happen in this country?
Yes.
Okay, can you give me some rationale? Why?
Well, it's just like you were talking about California with this Proposition 187. That's the start of it, more or less. Where there's discrimination of the minorities, not giving them this and that. Where a lot of these other people that are minorities, they came from other places themselves, they're council citizens, yet here they're trying to deny other people. And they won't,
Do you think that there are any prevention? Is there anything that we could do to stop that from happening? What do you imagine that? Let's talk about ideal. We can never be ideal. I mean, we're never perfect. We are born with positive, negatives, right? But the closest to what you imagine, how can we improve? How can we teach our children, or pass on to our children some kind of a moral that they would not have to live with what happened in the last.
I think maybe teaching children not to quit learning, not to quit acquiring the knowledge, not to let someone else make their decisions for them and think for themselves, not to accept anything at face value. If there's something that they feel, like you say, in their guts, that's wrong with a given situation or decision, for them to, if they can, teach them to take a step back from it and apply everything that they learned. And if they still are confused, teach them the resources to seek, to find, what truly the right answer is. I feel like that's probably the best one.
But I still think that, in this country we have learned something that the Yugoslavians haven't learned yet. We are a melting pot. We come together with different colors, different ideologies, different religions, and we are able to live with each other. That's what makes this country great, the ability that we have to live with one another. Like Ella says, it's not perfect, but somehow that's what makes the country great. And I tell the kids, I ask them, hey, how many are you here are from immigrant parents? Yes, raise your hands.
We're talking about great-grandparents. Doesn't have to be.
Great-parents, and half the class raises their hands, And I see Asian kids, black kids, Jews, Christians, Muslims. And I tell them, hey, it's the greatest country in the world. You are able to live with each other. And it's something that the Yugoslavians haven't quite learned yet.
Excuse me, I wanted to make something that doesn't stay well with me. Melting pot means that we all melting to be the same. It is not so. And sometimes you approach and you discourage people from a different ethnic background. They don't want it. They want to still keep something from their own country, which is positive. I came around a phrase about the mixing salad bowl. They're talking we are salad bowl because in a salad you got lettuce and you got radishes and you have cucumbers and you have onion, and we mix them together and apparently they taste good. So that's what it is.
But the onions are still onions and they're radishes.
Wait a minute, but they are that's fine. The point is that we need respect. Whenever I hear a law, California, whatever, that the Spanish kids are not allowed to speak Spanish in school, that they have, this is the most hideous thing. Why should a child be told that his language of his parents is not a good language? What's wrong with that? I mean, we need kids who speak, adults who speak Spanish, so they could be ambassador to South America. They could represent us in the right direction. But somehow, you know, when it comes to economics, that's where Harry comes in. He believes that when it comes to money, when it comes to greed, that's where all the venom, the anger, that all our good intention seem to be set aside because we are inspiring to have more and more. And if it means to have more, to step on somebody else, to get high, some people, more than some, are doing it.
I don't quite agree that greed is a very negative thing.
I do.
Motivating.
I do.
Greed is a motivating thing.
That's why I'm a social worker and he's a business.
Listen, even the communists want greed.
1 second. I'm sorry, sir. You wanted to speak.
Oh, yeah,
and I didn't have a chance.
About the United States, if it happened here outside of Newt Gingrich and president. We do have a constitution, but the thing I see as a real fear in America is just plain racism. What we have today, what's really scary, is this white supremacist movement we have. And there's even rumors of successions of states now. What's happening up in Montana and Utah areas. And this is maybe not in so much in the United States, but the United States in the past did break away over these issues at one time.
Right.
And it seems to be going in another direction where that may be possible again. And how do you feel the racism in the United States? Is
No,
what
I
see as the
feel
problem.
that the government is doing the right thing. I do believe that if there is a prejudice, we need to destroy at its inception when it grows up, and if democracy turns into tyranny, you know, rather than to have people participating in government, we have one man telling you what to do. I mean, you were not born probably many of McCarthy. I mean, McCarthy area. I mean, this was a guy who really, I mean, he was digging people, you know, who were not even communists. Maybe they were 17, 18-year-old when they were in college, and they had some tendency, you know, he was ruining their career, you know, whatever. So I feel that I don't think it will happen if we are aware of what is going on, if we do not vote for somebody because we like he's handsome, you like the way he parts his hair, he's cute, whatever. But we read the background of that individual. We know what he or she stands for. If we're really involved in the democratic process, I don't know whether you're aware that about 50% of our people in America vote. You know, I used to be a volunteer and I couldn't believe it because this was a right that was taken away from us. We had to vote. And we don't even respect, we take things for granted. And if you do not vote, if you're not interested, of course the wrong people will be elected because they are making an effort. You know, so I feel it's up to us. We are the representative of the government. We are the ones who are electing the people, and I feel we have to be more active. We need more activists, more people who are not afraid to be different, to stand up and speak out. It is not what you say, it's how you say it, you know. But we are very apathetic, and one thing I like to say, which is I do believe, that it's not the evil that I am concerned about, the evil, because it's usually small and can be contained. It's the majority of people, it's the silence of the majority who does not give a hoot and does not speak up. We had the incident, you know, where people in New York City, a girl was raped in the middle of the night. They were raping, she was asking for help. There were 10 people at the window watching, and nobody got up and did something about it. So it's the apathy that I'm concerned, the indifference. We don't care till it happens to us individuals. And we need to change that.
How much time do we have?
We have time for a few more questions, maybe to get some people who haven't
Yes,
had a
sir.
chance to talk to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were talking about prejudice and racism and all that stuff. Just prior to the war getting really hot and the incarceration of the Jews, was there significant prejudice in Germany?
The Germans have been notorious anti-Semites from many, many, many years. It goes back a little bit to Martin Luther, who was a virulent anti-Semite. And much of it can be traced to that particular time.
But what in Germany at that time was the prejudice things that were against the Jews? Most of the time they came, the people that we talked to were fairly successful. Their parents or whatever were successful business people. They were all fairly wealthy.
You talk about Jews.
In Jews, yes, in Germany and in Austria and in Poland.
How many were there, do you think? How many Jews do you think there were in Germany? Give me some sense of what do you think?
I don't know, probably
There were 80 million. There are 80 million Germans. Excuse me. There were 80 million Germans. You know how many Jews there were in Germany? 550,000. So you're talking about a minute proportion of the country. How many Jews do you think live in the United States? Give a figure, a percentage figure.
8 million.
No, a percentage figure.
How
Of the
many
total
percent of
population.
the total population?
How much?
7%.
Less than 2%.
Less than 2%. The lady's correct. So really, they were not a factor in the economy of the country. They were not all bankers. They were not all business people. You know, they were a small minority of people. And Hitler used the scapegoat method. He said to his neighbor, he says, "You see these guys over there? They're well-to-do. They got all the money. Let's beat up on them." And the neighbor said, "Hey, that's a great idea."
Because he could get the money, they were allowed to do anything they wished. There were no protection.
So really, what you have in Germany was not necessarily it was a latent anti-Semitism that was in people's hearts, if you will. And Hitler used that, you know, to whip up anti-Semitism.
He needed the scapegoat.
He needed that to rally all these anti-Semites around him. And the anti-Semites were there. Hey, it's great. Just to do away with 550,000 Jews. That's all they were. And what is the percentage of Mexican Americans, Spanish Americans in this country? What do you think? What does that represent?
It's about a third of the nation, I know that.
Is it about the third of the nation today?
It's going to be second.
That's pretty high.
Yeah, that are counted. That are counted. You don't know exactly how many come, you know, illegal over the border, back and forth.
No, but we're talking about the legal. I don't think it's third, is it?
Yeah, you know, how many are, you know.
Yeah.
That's a high percentage, I think. That's considerably
It's a
less.
little bit high.
But they are our neighbors. They are people that, you know, live south of the border. And over the past 100 years, you know, we never did much for our South American neighbor. We turned them into banana republics, you know, sucked out everything there is to be gotten. Really never was very helpful to South Americans in general.
And to Mexico, never mind, this is our close neighbor.
I don't think so. I think we had a tendency to do something and send Marshall Plan to Europe. You know, we were more helpful to the European than we were to our South American neighbors. But that's my opinion.
Maybe we can do a couple more questions before we wrap up.
Did I answer you, or did I get off the track?
You did in a way.
In a roundabout way,
Yeah. My real question was, Billy, what is the triggering mechanism that we get into? And it follows with your statement at the first is, when should you separate yourself from the course of action your government or your authority leaders do? And what was the mechanism in Germany that triggered that? Because previously, to whatever triggering device it was, the Jews and the Nazis and they live fairly compatibly.
Not the Germans.
Yeah.
The German, there was a lot of intermarriage also in Germany, very much.
So what was the key there? We've talked all around it. We haven't focused on
Well,
what the key was.
it's actually, you know, to be an anti-Semite is, in my opinion, a very lucrative thing. If you're going to start writing anti-Semitic tracts in this country, or books, all of a sudden you get to be a person that attracts a lot of other people, and money flows to you. You know, I think that the anti-Semitic writers in this country are writing for money. They know how to push that button, and they're able to convince, evidently, other people that Jews are different than they are.
You see,
And that's what happened in Germany.
I will give a little bit different answer. You know, if you study psychology, and I'm sure we all do, we're talking about the scapegoating. Usually, the person who are going to be persecuted, going to be discriminated, are not going to be the West. They're not going to be the majority of the people. It's going to be a small group of people that they will focus on. And usually in the time of disaster, I mean, Germany definitely lost the war. The people were hungry. There was depression. They needed something to stir the people. I mean, we're talking about it. Go back to Nero, the Christian, you know. What did Nero, was it Nero his name? Rome. Who burned the, what is it? Rome. And he blamed Christian for it. Why? Because he wanted to instigate all of these people to kill the Christians. Okay, Christians were minority at that time. Okay, this is all. The emperor or the power, they always will try to instigate against minority. But with the Jewish people, in addition, there is a history, 4,000 years of history of just the Christian world, and the first Christian, St. Peter were writing book, could never forgive the Jews for not accepting Christianity, for not accepting Jesus Christ as the God. They could never, and that's, it started, I mean, in our Christian world. In Poland, Poland had a very large number of Jewish people, one of the largest number. Out of 30 million Poles, there were 3.25 million.
That's 10% of the population.
I mean, this was just, now the children had been taught with the catechism to hate the Jews. They were conditioned from the time that they could understand. Okay, and this is how, so I don't think that what happened to Germany could happen if it wasn't for the background, for the Luther. Luther, again, could never forgive. He was very good friend for the Jews. He was trying to make them accept Christianity. But when the Jews refused, they said, we don't want a Christian. We believe in the God, one God. We don't, the Father. We do not believe in Jesus. Now, the way I look at it, Jesus was a prophet. He brought a different idea, you know, different. But he was not, to Jewish people, he was not a God. And this was one of the, you know how religion could stir up.
We're not talking about that's religion, but
so anyway.
you can scapegoat with the blacks. Look what happened in the South. You know, it's not the religion per se.
Any minority, as I say,
how many people were lynched?
Yeah.
Where nobody, so people thought there was, hey, it's no big deal, so we hung another guy.
Another nigger, never mind God.
How many people were hung? How about our Indians?
What did we do
What
to
did we do to the Indians?
Let's face it, right? We disseminate the Indians.
There was a disaster, absolute disaster, a terrible thing, a blot in history. And, you know, so we come back to the original thing about obedience. How do you blindly follow the idea that all the Indians have to be killed? What rationale do you have for saying that? Why didn't somebody say, hey, wait a minute, terrible thing we're doing here? I don't know that in history there were any great people standing up and yelling and screaming. Any other questions? Yes.
When you were in the United States in the early 50s, and even from that time on, did you have trouble convincing people of the actual size of the Holocaust?
Well, I don't think that,
Was there a lot of disbelief or?
no, the survivors actually were silent for approximately, when I say silent, really didn't do anything about talking about the Holocaust to any great extent, for about 10 years.
Well, the reason why I ask is when I was growing up through grade school and high school, I didn't know too much about it, except it was like a 4 paragraphs, 6 million Jews killed, World War II, blah, 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 we won and wonderful, and that was about what it was. I've learned more now, not necessarily from classes here, but just from what I've heard from different organizations. So was there a time of silence there?
There was a time of silence. It was a little more, it was about 10, 15 years. First of all, the survivors were in a shock. I mean, they had to learn to be human again, to get, my self-concept was zero. I felt, that they say self-fulfilling prophecy. I had been told for 4 years I was dirt, I was nothing. And at the end, I believed that I was nothing. And so we had to build our image, our feeling about ourselves, which took also most of the survivors who came to this country. They got married. They needed to have a family. They couldn't live with that vacuum. And they were involved in having family and children. There was no time. And nobody really cared. Somehow people didn't want to listen, And it just then, slowly, by writing, people began to ask questions. Of course, what Spielberg had done, I remember when he was, after the movie was producer, he did say that every penny that he makes on this movie will go into the education. And when we talk about education, we're not talking about educating the Jewish children, of course we do. We're talking about education, everybody who wants to listen. Because as I said, there is a moral imperative. We have to learn how to prevent another atrocity from happening.
But your answer is that indeed
there was a silence, definitely, yeah.
There was not complete silence, but there was no great earth-shaking things. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I'm very curious as to what you would say the overall attitude is of survivors. Now you're saying the average age is about 76 years old. Of course, there was a time of healing and silence. They needed to fill that void in themselves. And I see both of you as being very positive. You're very, I don't know if I would say optimist, but you have definitely learned the greater truth in all of this. Do you see that as the survivors now at your age who have gone through their life, they've lived their life, do you think that people that just gave up, who were emotionally destroyed, do you see that as being the minority now, or do you still see?
I think that the survivors did remarkably well in their psyche, in their psychological thing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing that they survived this and turned out to be substantial citizens and people who could navigate through life without complaining, doing well, working. They had perhaps reason to work harder than others because they had to prove to themselves. Like Ella said, you have to come back to life. You had to do something. Maybe we all had more on the ball as a result of that experience than most.
And somehow we learned some way the skill to survive. What does it take to be alive? And we knew that by brooding and feeling sorry for yourself, you're not going to get any place. By helping others, reaching out. But doesn't mean that every survivor is able to do what we are doing. Many of them would not stand up in front of a group and feel free to talk. They are somehow not able. I would say, what is it, about 5, 10%.
Well, in our
I don't
association,
think.
we have a group of survivors in this town, and we number first-generation survivors like Ella, about 140 individuals. And of the 140, there's really an age bracket here. Some of them are quite old. But out of the 140, maybe we have a dozen that are able to express themselves.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe less.
But you have to realize that they don't have a very good education. This is something that Ella has that they don't necessarily have. Ella was managed to go back to school, earned a master's degree, you know, and we have a number of them here. But by and large, most of the survivors did not get an education. They did well, they made a living for themselves and for their families, but they didn't have time to get an education.
I think that might be a good place to end the formal presentation, and maybe if people have individual questions, they could come up and talk to you. I want to thank, we have flowers for you both for coming and spending time with us. So do you have a few minutes to stick around and answer?
Oh, by all means.
Okay.
I'm sure.
So,
if anyone of you had seen a tattoo, do we have let me write it down first on the blackboard, then I will show you. I mean, I might not reach. Oops. We have a chalk?
yeah, there's a problem.
Okay. Now this number is tattoo.
Yeah, I'm going to, my
Yeah,
arm
okay.
is clear.
It was tattooed on my arm upon my entry into the hell of Auschwitz. We were depersonalized. There was no name. Nobody called you by name. You were in a number. And my number was 2773331. It's another additional way of putting somebody down by taking their name away. Now, I had quite a number of friends when I came back to Poland looking to see whether any of my family survived, telling me, Ella, why don't you take it off? I mean, you don't want to remember. And I told them, my experience is written in blood in my psyche. It's not going to help. But yet I was tempted to remove, because in Poland, I was afraid to show the number. I had to wear a long sleeve. There were a pogrom. I mean, they were killing the survivor in Poland. They dared to come back, okay? So we were frightened and we had to, but I'm glad I didn't, because, you know, we have so many revisionists, people who are denying. Did you ever come across literature, you know, saying the Holocaust is a hoax, it never happened. Now, imagine if there was nobody with tattoo, and not everybody's going to go to the library, because everything, the research is done. I mean, every per 6 million is documented. But the fact that you have a tattoo, like you group, you see my tattoo when you heard my story, you will remember, you know. And I say to my students that I make you, anybody who's listening to a survivor, to become a witness. And I do pass on to you that in the future, when you are confronted with a revisionist, that you could stand up and tell them. I still can't figure it out. I know, and I just can't comprehend why the denial. What do they have to gain by denying, except, again, it's as poputhey do make money, you know. And also the fact that they are living in that delusion that it's impossible that these things can happen. As long as we don't believe we are going to face the same thing, we need to face the fact that we are human, that there is a good and bad within, negative, positive within us, inside, and we have a choice to use the positive and to diminish the negative. We have a choice, and to allow 90% we can sort of, we are the sculpture of our own life. They are sometimes saying there are circumstances that we cannot help anything, but there is a book that I would recommend if you could read, if you didn't read, The Man's Search for Meaning. It's written by Franco. I forgot his first name. He was a survivor of Auschwitz. Very small book, very small. And he said that even with a naked existence, we always have a choice of attitude. This is something that nobody can take you away in a camp where we had nothing, not even hardly any clothes to wear. We still have a choice to be human and to behave human versus being a scoundrel and try to destroy others. This choice we have. And if I could leave you with that, never, you know.
Folks, nice seeing you, nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
I said to you, welcome. I feel, I don't feel good about, you know, talking about politics. I cannot describe, you know, what I'm saying.